Dumelang, Absheni, Ralocha, Sanmanani, Mulweni. My name is Naledi Mfoloe, and it is my absolute pleasure to welcome you to the latest edition of the African Diaspora News channel, where we unravel the stories that shape our world and our community. Now, three black women were victims of a racist attack while riding the Northern Line at King's Cross Station in September 2023. Yet, instead of receiving the justice they deserved, they found themselves persecuted by the very system that was supposed to protect them. Now, this is a story not just about one incident, right, but about a much larger issue facing minority in Britain today. The failure of the Crown's Protection Service, which is the CPS, right, and the police to properly address racism and their dangerous tendencies to blame the victims. Now, according to the three women, during the altercation, they were subjected to horrific racist abuse, including monkey chants and racial slurs, before Salma, who's one of the women, was actually bitten by a white female passenger. Now, the fact that an off-duty Metropolitan Police officer was present for the entire incident only adds on to the shock. The woman says that the police officer did not even try to intervene until the situation escalated physically. Yes, it wasn't the white woman who was charged, but the black woman who was questioned and ultimately prosecuted. Now, Danae Thomas, in particular, was one of the women, was actually charged with racially aggravated harassment against the officer who had failed to intervene. Now, this does raise troubling questions, right? Which is number one, how can we trust a system that fails to protect its own citizens when they are victimized? And number two, these women were trying to defend themselves, trying to stand up against racist abuse, yet the system turned its back on them. And to make matters worse, right, the police officer involved was not only dismissive, but also accused Danae Thomas of being racist. Now, what makes this case even more alarming is the response of the CPS. Initially, they pressed charges against the woman, but when the charges apparently reached the court, the prosecutor admitted there was no realistic prospect of conviction. So, after dragging these women through an emotionally and psychologically taxing process, they actually dropped the charges. Now, this is a classic example of how racial biases can seep into the criminal justice system, especially when it comes to protecting minorities. The system fails them time and time again. Now, this isn't an incident that is very isolated. I mean, the CPS and the police have a long history of mishandling cases involving racial abuse. How many more Black people must face this kind of treatment before real accountability is actually established? I mean, in this case of these women, right, they were subjected to a double injustice. First, they were denied protection when they were being abused, and then they were punished for standing up for themselves. How's that justice? In an exclusive interview, the women expressed their heartbreak, and not just at the personal trauma they endured, but at the larger systemic failure they represent. Dana Thomas, for example, spoke very openly about how the officer's lack of empathy and outright dismissal of her concerns was a direct reflection of how white people, particularly those in position of power, fail to understand the lived experiences of Black people in Britain. Let's have a look at this video.
There was then a physical altercation. Selma's arm was bitten. In the melee that erupted, hair was grabbed.
I heard her scream, "She's biting me." And I couldn't even see her. There were so many people on the train and I couldn't see her. And I could just hear her screaming in pain. It was awful.
It then emerged an off-duty officer had been present the entire time. But the women say only intervened once things got physical. When the British Transport Police arrived, their abuser cried and appeared to win the sympathy of officers. In a heated exchange with police, Danae Thomas told a male officer that when white women are racist, they play the victim. And as the officer was white, she did not trust his intervention. The policeman suggested her remarks were racist against him. Danae was later charged for racially aggravated harassment against the officer, whilst her abuser was given a caution.
My attacker is now acting like the victim, you know what I mean, and crying. And I'm trying to explain that your privilege has no status here. You're the attacker here. And that and I'm explaining that to a member of the police, and then that gets turned round on me to attack me even further. That's deep.
Now, one of the most painful moments in the interview is when Danae Thomas spoke about her daily reality as a Black woman in a world that constantly questions her humanity. I mean, she said, right, and I quote, "Remember, you walk in the privilege that I am not privy to." Now, this sentiment strikes a chord with many of us. I mean, for Black people, simply existing in a space where you're not the majority means constantly navigating microaggressions, biases, and systemic racism. And the police, the very institutions supposed to protect us, often fail to see their pain, or even worse, right? They amplify it by siding with the aggressor. Now, in this specific case, while the charges were dropped, the damage is already done. These women were forced to relive their trauma, to defend themselves, not only against the abuser, but also against the very system that should have protected them. And as far as the police and the CPS are concerned, their actions were simply part of a thorough investigation. But how thorough can any investigation truly be when it dismisses the lived experiences of the victims at every turn? Now, this case is a powerful reminder that the work to address racism within the criminal justice system is far from over. And the minorities in the UK need to be able to trust the system that are supposed to protect them. But trust can be demanded, right? It must be earned through action, through accountability, and a commitment to confronting racial biases head on. But for now, women like Danae, Salma, and Davina are left asking, how can we trust a system that failed us so badly? What are your thoughts on this? Please, let's continue the conversation in the comment section. And while you at it, don't forget to give this video a thumbs up. That's it from me. Till we meet.